Welcome to Wicked Lies, a podcast of how truth was destroyed by lies. Caution: podcast contains real people who were destroyed by wicked lies. For mature audiences only.
So, getting started a bit late here, but welcome. Our speaker today is Abraham Bonowitz, co-founder and executive director of Death Penalty Action. I was going to let him speak and tell us about his organization and then open it up for questions. So go ahead.
Well, thank you. First, I apologize for being late. I was a little bit distracted by a prisoner who called me, and I got sucked into that conversation, and I'm sure you all know how that can go. So anyway, here we are. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you. I know you all are involved in wrongful conviction work, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So Death Penalty Action is a national works to shine a spotlight on executions, all executions, whether the people claim to be innocent or are actually innocent or are as guilty as they come. We oppose the death penalty, and we do so from a variety of angles. People come together based on whatever their motivation is. Our uniting theme is that we oppose the idea that government should have the power to kill. And again, people approach that from whatever angle that they want to approach it from. But we are basically the only national entity right now that is single focused on the death penalty. I mean, there's lots of groups like the ACLU or Amnesty International or other national groups that have multiple focuses, and ours is just on the death penalty, and our work is to end the death penalty. But we also recognize that that is a process that takes either courts throwing it out or passing legislation. And I've been a part of passing legislation in a number of states where we have actually legislatively abolished the death penalty, including in New Jersey, New Mexico, Illinois, Connecticut, Maryland, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Colorado, Virginia, Washington, Delaware now. Some of those states, New York, Washington, and Delaware, the courts threw it out. And in Washington, Delaware, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
In Washington and Delaware, the courts threw it out, and then we still passed legislation to scrub the language out of the statute. And then I did mention Nebraska, where we passed legislation to abolish the death penalty. More Republicans signed that bill or voted for that bill than Democrats, because there were only 8 Democrats in that unicameral body. There's only a Senate in Nebraska. So we passed the bill. The governor vetoed it. We overrode the veto, and then the governor put his own money into a referendum that put it on the ballot and brought it back. But my point, though, is that there are strategies in place that have worked to legislatively end executions in some states, and that continues to be the main strategy of how to stop it, is to pass legislation. And up until about 2015 or so, we were on a trajectory to get to a place where the U.S. Supreme Court might actually strike it down if they were to look at the death penalty based on the Eighth Amendment prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment. They've decided it's not cruel, right? But you can't deny that it's unusual. And the way you see that it's unusual is just how infrequently we use the death penalty, which is really in fewer than 1% of the cases where it's possible. And also the places that it's at. One second, please. And the if you look at the map of the United States, not by state, but even by state, there's 23 states that don't have the death penalty. But if you look at it by county, got over 3,500 counties or county-like structures, and fewer than 2% of those have sent people to death row and are responsible for most of the people on death row. And that's and really, if you look at even closer, there's only about 15 jurisdictions that are actively using the death penalty. It's 15 counties out of over 3,500. And that would be the argument to bring to the US Supreme Court, which was the plan up until the time that Justice Kennedy started waffling. And then there were some shifts at the makeup of the US Supreme Court, which made anything progressive unlikely, the situation that we're in. So that takes us to a place where we are seeing, we're not attorneys. Our job is on occasion to take on cases where we actually build campaigns for particular prisoners. If you know the name Melissa Lucio, that's one of those that we built a campaign around her case and helped stop that execution. And we can lay claim to our work actually having an impact on that. There's a few other cases where we've gotten involved and helped build campaigns where the people have been executed. And ultimately, our focus right now, as we're seeing, what's on the horizon, so far this year, 4 states have resumed or tried to resume executions for the first time in over a decade. And that's Idaho, which had a guy on the gurney, and they were trying to kill him, and they couldn't get an IV started. They sent him back to his cell, and they're going to try again. Utah just carried out its first execution in over a decade. South Carolina just carried out its first execution in over a decade and has scheduled another one for 4 weeks from this past Friday, and they have a plan to do that on the regular for at least 5 or 6 months going forward. And then Indiana has set a first date, which is December 18th. So and it's possible that a couple other states may see also first executions in a while. So where we're at is providing tools for people who want to take action and do something. And some of it is just as simple as making sure there's a petition on every case and the information that people need to be able to take action and to speak about this and to share about this and let people know. And then, it is, just to be clear, it's really the lawyers' jobs to figure out how to stop executions. And of course, part of our job is shining a spotlight on the fact that it doesn't matter if you have the best lawyers in the world. At this point, the courts are kind of stuck in the way they are being, which is to not hear new evidence, to not allow conversations about unfairness, and even things that were very recently discovered. They're just not interested in the arguments anymore, and they're denying appeals that 10 years ago would have been, had a hearing in court. And that's what is really troubling. So what that means is it's where we're at is simply making sure that people are aware this is happening, and we need to oppose it. And we do everything from making sure there's a petition in every single case and something that people can do. And then as it gets closer, we ramp up the phone calls and any kind of public pressure like that. And we try to make sure that there's in-person demonstrations at the prison or petition delivery to the governor's office, that sort of thing, things that everyday people can do. And then if it comes down to it and the execution goes forward, then we carry on a live virtual vigil. So online in a Zoom situation like this, where we also loop in people who are at the live in-person prisons, protests at the prison or at the state capitol or wherever they may be in a given state. That's the kind of work that we do. And we don't really provide or do, we don't have a facts and figures page of the death penalty. We send people, if you want that, get it from the Death Penalty Information Center. We're the death penalty action people. There's the death penalty info center. We don't think we need to worry about, having our own facts and figures page, and we can just point to that one, and it's as thorough as it's going to be. So, we can try to keep it focused and simple, and we are the place for people to come when they want to take action about the death penalty.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions and then I will open it to everybody else. But so I'm in California. We do have a death penalty. We actually put it on the referendum. The state's voters voted to speed up the death penalty in our state.
In
And then,
California,
yes, and then we went and elected Gavin Newsom, who basically unilaterally halted it. But potentially he's terming out. When he's gone, whoever comes in may just start it right back up again. So do you know if there's any legislative work here in California to get it banned, overturned, not allowed, whatever?
I can tell you about what's happening. Pardon me. I have a program that I'm running in 35 minutes. I just need to tell somebody
Right.
something. Um, and I want to invite you to that program. Actually, I'll put in the chat a link if you want to.
Okay,
If you want
I've
to know
got
what's
the link,
happening
yeah.
in the we call it the forecast. We look at the executions that are coming up in the next month. Usually every first Sunday of the month. So we'll be
Okay.
looking at that. So in California, number one, we don't know who's going to be the candidate for governor, right? And that's going to make a big difference. We don't anticipate anybody that's going to be a serious candidate coming in and saying, I'm going to resume executions. In fact, what they've actually done is redistribute everybody that has been on death row, which is like 700 people in California, through the prison system. And many of them are in general population now, which is unusual and not the way it is in most states. And that doesn't mean that they can't be all regathered or get an execution date, but it's so unlikely. One of the things that Gavin Newsom did was be very intentional immediately. I mean, within the first 2 months of his term, he ordered the dismantling of the execution chamber at San Quentin. And then he was also very deliberate in that he said he's going to reprieve everybody, but he did not try to commute all of the sentences, because he was of the understanding that if he were to commute all the sentences, try to change all those sentences to a lesser sentence, then that would be challengeable. But by not doing anything with the sentences, but simply saying if any execution is going to happen, he's going to reprieve it, meaning push it down the road, that can't be challenged. And that's the status quo. So there is a growing collective in California. Got to try to remember the name of it. And I can email this if it doesn't come up here.
Okay.
Let me just see if I can find, here we are. I'm just looking for the link. California. It's not coming up, but let me just give one other thing a try. Because this is something you can actually get involved in.
Okay. So there's a California-based group.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you know where in California?
Do I know where in California?
Well, if not, I'll look.
No. Well, it's a statewide effort, and there's a whole bunch of groups that are involved. And let me just see here. Mona. Yeah, here we are.
Okay.
No, that's not the right thing.
Okay. Well, you
I'm going
can
to find it. I'll find
you
it
can
for you and I'll
email it.
send it to you, Don.
Okay. So,
But that's there is an effort, and it's groups like the ACLU and a bunch of different religious groups and
uh-huh.
other rights groups that are involved,
Okay.
and their goal uh, is get all the sentences commuted. And we're
Okay.
doing a similar sort of thing on the
Uh-huh.
federal level. The president has some powers. President Biden campaigned on a promise. Part of his own policy positions were that he opposes the death penalty, which was a big
Right.
shock to all of us, actually, when that came out. But he had a pledge to try to abolish the federal death penalty and to work towards reducing executions at the state level. As
Mm-hmm.
far as we can tell, he hasn't actually done anything about any of that, and we're
Well,
trying to
and
get him to actually live up
yeah.
to. I mean, the president. The one thing he has done is he's not continued the execution spree of federal prisoners that was
Right.
going on the last 6 months of the Trump administration.
Right.
And,
It
so,
seems like the Democratic Party's completely dropped it from their platform, though.
well, that's don't take that as a necessarily bad thing. I think what they were doing is retrofitting some things. There's a lot of things that Democrats believe in and work towards that were dropped from the platform. I think, and this is my own interpretation, is that they were looking to just not provide the other side, things to be attacked on. Okay, because at the end of the day, Kamala Harris also opposes the death penalty. There is no mandate to resume or increase executions that is talked about at the Democratic Party level. And more important, if you were watching the Democratic convention on night 4, which is the night that Vice President Harris accepted the nomination for president, early in the evening, they had Reverend Al Sharpton with the four surviving members of the Central Park Five. And they very explicitly talked about Trump's penchant for the death penalty
Okay.
and received lots of applause about their statements to that we shouldn't have the death penalty. And then similarly during the vice presidential debate, you had Kamala Harris say, challenge Trump on the Central Park Five
She
full
did.
page ad,
Yeah.
to call for the death penalty for people who turned out to be innocent, black and
Right.
brown people. So
Right.
I think they've decided that's their talking point. That's where they're going to focus. And it's actually better. And this is just purely from a campaign or strategic point of view. This is not a winning issue. Most people have a gut reaction. Most people are not like us, have not really thought a whole lot about criminal justice issues and don't have a deep connection to this issue, or even prison issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so the gut reaction when you hear about some horrible crime is, of course, that person should be held accountable, and of course, throw away the key or even kill him, without having much thought, right? So because the issue is so nuanced and you can't really explain it it's hard to express in a comprehensive way opposition of the death penalty that's not morally based without in 30 seconds. You can do it, but you have to be ready to do that. And the point is, I think that they're just trying to take it off the table.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that they took it out of the platform. I don't like that Joe Biden hasn't followed through to the extent that he could. That's what we're working on. We're actually working both in the front door, getting people to write letters and call and all that to the White House, but also behind the scenes. We put a lot of effort into reaching the president behind the scenes. And also now Vice President Harris, the chair of our board is Reverend Sharon Risher, and her mother and 2 cousins were among the 9 people that were killed in the Charleston AME church shooting in 2015. So therefore, she's a murder victim family member, but the killer of her loved ones is on federal death row and is arguably the most famous person well-known and most what's the word, infamous
Notorious.
person
Yeah.
on federal death row. I mean, there might be a little competition between him and the Boston bomber, but
Yeah.
of the people on the federal death row, so here we have a person who's a murder victim family member, and she's our board chair saying, I don't want the death penalty. And by the way, on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time, we're going to put up a conversation at Thursday is World Day Against the Death Penalty, October 10th every
Hmm.
year. And we just recorded a conversation that will go live on at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning with her and also Reverend Dr. Jack Sullivan Jr., who is the chair of a group called Murder Victim Families for Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing, which is murder victim family members who oppose the death penalty. His sister's murder remains unsolved, as well as a guy named Deacon George Kane, who is the former police commissioner, who also is now a police chaplain, but a law enforcement guy. And he also so this conversation between the three of them talking about how the death penalty doesn't do anything to protect us. It didn't do anything to protect the loved ones of these people who were murdered, and it's not it's not even a good law enforcement tool. So that conversation is going to be happening, going to be available starting Thursday. So you'll see
Okay.
that too.
All right. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, please use the raise your hand feature and I'll call on you. And if not, I have another one. Anybody?
Okay, Don, go ahead.
All righty. Well, so at my September 9th event, we had a speaker, Obie Anthony from Exonerated Nation, and he called out, this was before the execution, Marcellus Khalifa Williams. And I had actually gotten into quite a heated conversation with one of the local conservatives. I'm in one of the conservative counties in California. And this guy was going on and on about how he had all these chances and blah blah blah. And uh, I actually found a really excellent summary on Counterpunch of kind
Mhm.
of all the steps that were taken and the misses and so on. And his retort was that the district attorney who offered him the recent deal was a horrible person. He should have just fought to get him exonerated. And I kept saying, he's out of time. This deal would have saved his life and given him a chance to maybe still fight this. And the guy just wouldn't see the point. So I don't know what you say to somebody like that, but
Well, sometimes there's nothing to be said that's going to. I mean, so my rule of thumb, having been doing this for over 30 years, and our organization is, we don't see it as our job to change anybody's mind. Our job is to find the people who agree with us and get them to do something that's actually useful, right? That being said, every time there's an execution like that, and I was actually there in Missouri the day that Khalifa was supposed to have an evidentiary hearing where they were going to look at the DNA evidence that they wanted to test and all that. This was 4 weeks out from his scheduled execution. And the hearing was set aside. And they had a meeting, the defense and the prosecutors and the judge, and came out of that meeting saying, okay, there's a deal. And the deal was that he was going to be allowed to plead to a lesser offense, be sentenced to life without parole. He could maintain his claim of innocence and continue to work towards freeing himself, and the execution would be off the table. And that was about 3 o'clock that everything came out and they were let out of court and all that. And I live in Columbus, Ohio. That was in St. Louis. So we get back on the road and start driving out of town. And by 5 o'clock, the Attorney General has appealed that ruling. And here the prosecutor even made that deal, right? So the
right.
AG wanted to see the execution. and uh, and that held, and they killed the guy. And I'll tell you, I mentioned that we do these Zoom vigils every time that
Yes.
there's an execution. There was also an execution that night in Texas, a guy named Travis Mullis who had
Right.
waived his appeals and said, "I want to be executed too." But normally for our execution, our online vigils, we'll have a registration of somewhere between 60 and 100 people, and by the time it's all done, maybe 120 people have registered. Um, but that morning, by the morning of that execution, over 3,000 people had registered. And
I
by the time
saw
it was
that.
done, over 5,000 people had registered. And our Zoom webinar capacity is 500 people. So, um, it was just the whole world was watching. And I will
Yeah.
tell you, it was just on Kelly Clarkson's talk show, Helen Mirren. I just saw a clip of this, read one of Khalifa's poems just the
Right.
other day. There has been this tremendous, when something like that happens, when you get a Troy Davis, or we're going to hear about Richard Glossip, his case is being argued in the Supreme Court on Thursday.
Right.
Anytime that happens, you have people having their eyes opened a little bit. You know, it's kind of a sad that it's rarely the injustice, because you can find injustice in every case. Okay, one of the things that made me change my mind about the death penalty was just learning that we don't live up to the bedrock foundation of our legal system, which to me is the four words carved into the face of the U.S. Supreme Court building: equal justice under law. Those are the four words. And anybody that's ever encountered our criminal legal system knows that we don't have that, right? And but every time there's an execution where there's some issue of unfairness that's glaring, for example, Khalifa, but then 2 days later executed in Oklahoma, Emmanuel Littlejohn, who didn't kill anybody. Emmanuel
Right.
Littlejohn was part of a robbery, and the owner of the shop came out shooting or came out with a gun or whatever, and was shot and killed. But the witnesses said it was the taller, darker man, and Emmanuel was the shorter, lighter-skinned man. And um, and the prosecutors prosecuted the two of them separately and said to each of their separate juries, this guy was the shooter. So they
Right.
knew what the truth was, and they lied. And then to top it all off, the shooter was convicted but got a life sentence, and Emmanuel was convicted and got a death sentence and was
Yep.
executed.
Yep.
And whenever something like that happens, then it opens people's eyes. So
We've got
um,
the shaken baby case in Texas coming up. So
that's
yeah.
come go right. I put the link in the chat here. If it works, then Robert Robertson's wife, Manuela, is going to be
Hmm.
on the Zoom with us
Okay.
starting in 15 minutes. And I
Okay.
wanted to say, I apologize for being tardy. And I do need to go because I got to set up this next
Sure.
thing. But you can email me, and I'm happy to come back and have more conversation with you all.
Okay.
Look at our webpage, sign the petitions, opt into the email list, and
Yeah.
trust me, for some people it's too much, but
Sure.
some weeks there's an email every day, because you can't put too many things in an email, and there's so many things going on that we have to know about and to take action on.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And gonna let you go. And I have to do my grocery shopping, but I don't care. I'm coming to your meeting.
Okay, well,
So,
I invite you all. It's a webinar format, but I think you'll find it to be interesting and
okay.
and you'll come out knowing about the 3 people scheduled to be executed in the next 30 days, which are another volunteer, Derek Dearman in Alabama, and then this guy Robert Robertson, who there turns out was no crime, and then also
Right.
Roger Moore, I think is his name, in South Carolina. He just got his date on Friday. And the thing about him is that he went in and robbed a store. He was unarmed, and the store owner pulled out a gun and tried to and they wrestled, and he got the gun and shot the guy. He did not go into the store planning the murder.
Right.
And that's one of the things that has to be there to make it a capital murder is premeditation. And he did not go in there planning to kill anybody. It turns out that his prosecutor is, if the victim is white, they seek the death penalty every single time. And that's where the real racism is in the death penalty, by the way. It's in part in the color of the perpetrator, but it's when the victim is white that they really go for it. So with that, I'll leave you and hopefully see you in about 15 minutes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to Wicked Lies. If you would like to learn more about advocates for the falsely accused, join us at www.theaffa.org. That's www.theaffa.org.